Hi guys, welcome to my channel. In this video we will talk about the most important data types you should know as a beginner in Python. The four basic ones we will go today are strings, integers, floats, and booleans. And once you get the hang of them, it will be much easier for you to learn the other ones as an incremental knowledge. I will be making way more tutorials on Python and machine learning as well. So if that's something you want to see, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel as well. And without further ado, let's get into the video. So data types in programming languages is a highly crucial concept, and Python is no exception. In Python, understanding the data types is very crucial to understanding Python. And the main reason is that because different data types are good at doing different things. So with that, let's get into the first one, which is strings. This is how we make a comment, by the way. So if you ever written a hello world code in Python, you already use strings. Whenever you're dealing with text data in Python, we should enclose them with double quotes or with single quotes. For Python, it doesn't matter. Both of them work the same way. And hence the result we get is exactly the same. So as long as we are not using other quotes inside our quotes, it won't matter. But if I decide to quote something, it will make a difference. So in here, if I want to quote the important part, one thing I can do is to use double quotes. But when I do double quotes, Python will say, well, I see a string here, I don't know what this does, and there's another string here. So to avoid that, one thing we can do is to simply replace these with single quotes. So our major string here is surrounded by single quotes, and we have double quotes inside here. And we can also do the vice versa. And it would work the same way. So whenever we enclose something we write with these quotes, it will be understood as strings. So even if we were to write some numbers, they would be still understood as string by Python. So we wouldn't be able to do some calculation with them. So if I were to say print 100 plus 200, Python would see both of them as strings and would concatenate them. And I would get 100, 200. But if I want to actually make some arithmetic with actual numbers, I would have to use a data type that's assigned for numbers. And the simplest one I can use is integers. So let's get into that. So integers are basically whole numbers. They can be positive or negative or zero, and they have no size limit in Python. So as long as you can fit these numbers into your memory on your computer, you will not have any size limit. So I can make it like this, and I will get the calculation rather than getting the string concatenation of them. I also have a full tutorial on strings, by the way, and if you want to get more in-depth knowledge into them, I will be putting that to somewhere on the screen, probably somewhere up here or here. But in this tutorial, I wanted to give you a brief overview of the most important data types. So we talked about strings, then some integers, but what if you needed to make some calculation that involves some decimal numbers? In Python, I can divide 5 by 2 using the forward slash. And I would get the 2.5. And the data type that this 2.5 is something called float. And we can see that by checking the data type with a built-in function called type. And this would give me the float data type. If I do the same thing for others as well, I can also see that. So let's do it for this one. This would give me strings. If I do the same thing for any of these, they would also give me a string. And let's also do it for this integer. And it also gives me an int. And rather than just having the result of the calculations, I can also create floats like this. So if I say a equals 5.123, and if I say print a, again, this would be a floating point number. So floating point numbers can also be negative as well. So let's also check its type by saying print type a. And what we did here and what we did in the previous ones as well is type checking. And we can also do something called typecasting. And with typecasting, we can actually convert these data types into each other as long as they make sense to Python. So when I say a equals 100 in quotations, Python would say that that's a string, as we guessed, but if I remove these quotations, now we have an integer. But what if we were to receive an input from the user, and that input was actually a string? But we know that this is 100, and there should be a way to convert this to a number, and yes, there is. For that, I can say int, and in parentheses, I will give it a, which is the 100 in strings. And now when I check it, I successfully converted the string of 100 into an int of 100. But what if I was actually dealing with money amounts and I want to use floating numbers? And with that, I can also convert this to floats as well, which will have more accuracy. And now our 100 will have a decimal. If we also had a decimal here, we would be able to do the same thing the same way as well. And with that, let's also move to booleans. Booleans are also quite fundamental to Python as well, and booleans can have two values. And the two values they can have are true and false, and they have to be exactly written like this with the capital T and capital F, because Python is case sensitive, and if I were to try to write this with a lower caps T, I will get an error, so I will fix that. So I should turn it back to a capital T. And the same thing is true for false as well. So in Python, we can check many things for their trueness or falseness. So usually most numbers or data types are accepted to be true as long as they are not zero or empty. So one example would be, so if I say print bool, which will convert the value I put in here to a boolean, and I say 1, it would give me a true. And if I were to put a 0, that would be false. And any number I put here, which can be negative or positive, as long as they are not 0, it will be true. And the same thing is true for decimals as well. So if I were to use a floating point number here, which can be 1.123, I would also get true. And this can also be negative as well. And from strings, an empty string would equal to a false, but a string with something in it would be true. And same thing is true for single quotation as well. And if I also put in here, there will be also strings that are not empty, so it will also give me true as well. So with that, we've seen all the basic data types that includes strings, integers, floats, and booleans. And we did type checking on them as well as type casting on them, in which we changed their type from int to float to string to boolean. And that was it for today's video. If you want to learn more about these data types more specifically, I will make sure to put their videos on screen somewhere as well. And with that said, I hope you got some value out of this video, and I will see you next time.